Hi there, this is James Tripp, this is Hypnosis Without Trance, and as I'm recording this, it is late afternoon on New Year's Eve 2012, so by the time you watch this video it will be 2013. So wherever you are, I'm wishing you a wonderful new year. Now what I'm about to share with you is a little clip of a video of what I am rather cheekily calling the Bubble Induction. Now I say cheekily calling it the Bubble Induction because if you know Hypnosis Without Trance, you know I do not believe there is a special altered state called trance, or there is any such thing as a state of hypnosis as such, and therefore that inductions are not necessary. But you may also have seen a video that I posted up a while ago called Induction Rituals, where I explained that inductions do have a function, do have a usefulness in Hypnosis Without Trance in terms of being rituals that suggest and seed certain ideas and set certain frames, and also for building response sets that you can draw people into. These are useful ways of using what are classically known as inductions. Now this particular piece was not intended as an induction. It was put together from a functional perspective when I was out doing hypno-mentalism demonstrations. The idea being that when I would go out, I would want to create an altered reality for people, but I wouldn't necessarily want to have to spend the evening being the hypnotist. So I wanted a device that would open up a different reality and then enable me to close it back down afterwards. And this is why I developed what I'm calling here the Bubble Induction. Now I'm going to show you a clip of this Bubble Induction, and then afterwards I'm going to break it down piece by piece. The clip was filmed recently at the Cambridge NLP group, in the December meet of the Cambridge NLP group, and I was doing a talk on practical reality shaping. The way I'm using the piece here is to find out who in the group is going to be a great responder from a hypnotic perspective. So I'm setting up a reality. I'm setting up this reality and inviting people to engage with it. And I am watching the group to see who engages with it. And I'm looking for quality of response. I'm looking for real psychoactive engagement. The person who was the most responsive, the person who did engage with it the most, was the person I ultimately used for the demo, which I've not shown here, and was an excellent hypnotic subject. Now I just want to say before we watch this that the particular piece here was not intended for public consumption. It's just a small camera at the back of the room. It was sat right by a heater, so the sound was terrible. I've done my best to repair the sound. But I edited the video up because I said I would for a friend of mine in Australia who I wanted to send this clip to. I thought while I was editing it up I would share it with you here. And here it is. It's the Bubble Induction. Let's watch it through and afterwards we'll break it down. Before I do, I'd like for you for a moment to just look up at this point and imagine, in fact, imagine about here, there is a bubble. Bubble just floating right up there in space. And that bubble, as you watch it, as you look at it now, is going to expand and expand and expand out through all of us to encompass all of this space. Because just for a time inside of this bubble, we're going to play a little with the edges of reality, just have some fun with some things. And I want you to know that outside of this bubble that we're in now, reality as you know it is still there, it's still going on, and will still be there. And at any point if you wish to step out and reconnect with that, you may do so. So thank you very, very much for helping out with that. So, there's that bubble. It's a reality distortion bubble. And just for a moment, you can catch your breath. And thank you very, very much for creatively partaking in that, because that's something that you and I created together there. And I really want to thank you very much for your participation with that. We're just going to kind of let that bubble take all the time you need to just let that close back down again until it draws back in to this spot up here and just pops out. So that's it in full. Let's break it down now and see how the language works, see how each piece of communication works to create and support that reality. Now the first thing to be clear about here is intent. What is the intent at the beginning of the process? Now, if you've seen the video on rapid induction rituals, you'll remember the idea of ritual being a mode of communication, a way of suggesting and seeding certain ideas. So this is a key element of the intent at the beginning of this process. The key idea that I want to seed is that we're entering into a space where there's an altered reality about to take place, and I'm going to open this space out. Regular reality is going to continue out there, but we are going to be in this unique bubble of altered reality. This is the key idea that I want to seed. In addition to that intention, is the intention to set up a vivid imagined process and to invite people to engage with that process. Now, this is a process with a temporal element, as all processes are. They develop and unfold across time. What I'm interested in is how people's engagement moves with the process. Do they remain engaged? Do they remain transfixed with the events as they unfold? Those who do are likely to be excellent hypnotic responders. I'd like for you for a moment to just look up at this point and imagine about here, there is a bubble just floating right up there in space. Now right here what I'm doing is I'm setting up the first point of visualization, the first point of imagination. I'm placing this bubble in space and I'm inviting people to engage with it. Now notice how I move it. I set it up initially. I support it all with my non-verbal communication. It's not just words. I set it up initially in one space and I move it. So I'm already paying attention to who's paying attention and how they're paying attention and whether they are following the change in process as I make it. Another element that's worth pointing out here is that as I set that up in space, I'm imagining it there vividly myself, so as I engage congruently with it throughout. This way, my non-verbal communication will take care of itself without me having to think consciously too much about it. So when you do this, remember, when you set that bubble up, see it as vividly as you can yourself. It's almost like a piece of self-hypnosis in that respect. When we look at closing down the bubble towards the end of this video, you'll see how truly important this element really is. Now let's take a look here at the wording. What I'm saying is I'd like for you for a moment to just look up at this point and imagine. Now I'm saying look up at this point. That is a direct instruction and I want to see who follows it, who is going to respond. I say and look up at this point and imagine that there is a bubble floating right here. Imagine. Now think about the hypnotic loop. If you remember the hypnotic loop, we have beliefs, imagination, physiology, and experience. So what I'm doing here is I'm beginning a hypnotic loop and I'm kicking it off at point 2 in the loop. I'm engaging imagination directly to begin the hypnotic process. The last thing to mention here is that when I do this process one-on-one, I do it quite differently. So one-on-one, you want it to be more interactive. So when you say, imagine there's a bubble floating right here in space, you watch to see them engage and then you ask, and as you look at that and as you see that there now, what kind of bubble is that bubble? So you elicit from them a brief description, and this, I believe, increases engagement and increases buy-in. As they engage, as they verbalize the experience that's being created, it enhances the experience. And I've mentioned this before in relation to Robert Cialdini's commitment and consistency principle. They are committing to the reality that is being created. Okay, let's move on and look at the next piece of the process. And that bubble, as you watch it, as you look at it now, is going to expand and expand and expand out through all of us to encompass all of this space. So obviously this phase is about expanding the bubble out so that we're no longer looking at the bubble, we're all of us inside of the bubble. Now, again, just notice the pacing and the non-verbal communication. As I'm expanding the space out, I'm doing it non-verbally as well as verbally. With regard to language patterning, there's some classic pacing and leading going on here. I'm saying, and that bubble pointing to, gesturing to the bubble where it has been placed in space. As you watch it, as you look at it now, so I'm pacing the fact that they are watching it because I can see that they are watching it. I am also presupposing that it is there in saying this, but as you watch it and as you look at it now, that's a kind of a pace and a lead, encouraging them to continue looking at it. And then I lead with is going to expand and expand and expand out through all of us to encompass all of this space. And I'm supporting that fully with my non-verbal communication, with that expansive gesture. Also, notice at this point that even though I originally set this up as imagine that there is a bubble there, I am no longer speaking about it in terms of imagination. My language is presupposing that it is there. So this is an indirect suggestion tailored to start moving the high-quality hypnotic responders across from imagination to a place of hallucination where they are actually seeing and perceiving this bubble, to some extent at least, expanding out all by itself in this place, in this space, and surrounding them. Because just for a time inside of this bubble, we're going to play a little with the edges of reality, just have some fun with some things. And I want you to know that outside of this bubble that we're in now, reality as you know it is still there, it's still going on, and will still be there. And at any point, if you wish to step out and reconnect with that, you may do so. Okay, so here I'm continuing to support everything that I'm doing fully, completely, with all of my non-verbal communication. But just to focus in on the linguistics of it, I begin by saying, because just for a time inside of this bubble. Now I'm using this phrase, just for a time, to separate this out, not just in space, but in time. This is something that is going to be happening temporarily, and reality is going to be returned later on. Remember what I was saying at the beginning about intent, about what I wanted to have happen, to be able to open this space up for a time and then close it back down again. So that piece of languaging is supporting that element of intent. So I'm saying inside of this bubble, we're going to play a little with the edges of reality. Now I really like this phrase, and I use this a lot. We're going to play a little with the edges of reality, because it implies something significant is going to happen without specifying exactly what that is. So it gives me a lot of maneuverability, a lot of different things, a lot of different places I can go. I haven't said anything specific is going to happen, but what I have implied is something significant is going to happen. And if you have the no-fail protocol, you'll recognize this as what I call their Andrex framing. It's a soft frame in that it gives a lot of flexibility, but it's a strong frame in that it implies significance and power. Now the next thing here is I say we're going to play with the edges of reality a little and just have some fun with some things. This is an important element too. I want people to just relax and know this is about having fun. There's nothing really intense or really serious that's going to happen. It's just going to be fun. If they think it's going to be fun, that increases their likelihood of just letting go and buying into the process, going with the flow and having fun, which is exactly what we want. Now, next I move on with the words, and I want you to know that outside of this bubble that we're in now, reality as you know it is still there. It's still going on. What I'm saying here, what I'm emphasizing here, is that by contrast, because reality out there is still going on, reality as you know it, obviously that implies very strongly but indirectly that reality inside of this bubble is not as you know it. It is a different reality. It is implying indirectly that reality has already shifted. I then go on to point out that it will still be there, and that at any point, if they wish to, they can step outside and reconnect with that reality that's out there. Now when I'm saying this, the way I'm saying this, what I'm suggesting is that they might want to do that. And because I'm suggesting they might want to do that, I'm increasing the indirect suggestion that something unusual is going to happen. I'm offering them an out, I'm offering them an opt-out. The implication of offering the opt-out is that there is something to opt out of. There is something strange and interesting going to happen. So that's quite a subtle piece of indirect suggestion, but it's a very, very powerful piece. Okay, so that's how we open the bubble. let's now move on to look at closing the bubble back down after the hypnotic demonstrations that you will have undertaken. So thank you very, very much for helping out with that. So, there's that bubble. It's a reality distortion bubble. And just for a moment, you can catch your breath. And thank you very, very much for creatively partaking in that, because that's something that you and I created together. And I really want to thank you very much for your participation with that. So the first thing to notice here is that after the person who's been assisting me returns to her seat, I step back into the same place I was in before. It's the same spatial location, and I open up the same gesture that I used to open the bubble. So I'm returning to the point where I'd opened the bubble. This is utilizing a spatial and visual anchor, because I'm going to close it back down from the same point that I opened it. Now, by doing this, what you're essentially doing is firing back up that perceptual and experiential neurology that was at play within the spectators at the point at which you open the bubble up. So you're bringing them back into that reality. You're revivifying the reality that you created in the first place. Now, you'll notice at that point that I don't actually continue the process. I pause the process for a moment because I notice that the person who's helped me out with the demo is still very much responding to what's happened. So I take that opportunity to engage with her once again. And if you're familiar with the Hypnosis Without Trance Hypnosis Mastery Program materials, you'll remember the 5-step process, and you'll remember that last step of handing back and empowering the person that you've been working with. So I take this opportunity, because she's still engaged, to empower her and let her know that she was part of creating that experience. I don't want to play the role of the Svengali. I want the person I'm working with to be empowered. So this is what I'm doing here. Just going to kind of let that bubble take all the time you need to just let that close back down again until it draws back in to this spot up here, and just pops out. Okay, so after that brief interlude, that brief empowerment interlude, we're back into the process again, and once again I'm firing up the process with the spatial and visual anchors by assuming the same place and the same posture. Now, if you watch what I do here in comparison to when I open the bubble up, I almost go in reverse, almost in rewind, exactly. Now, if you remember, I was talking about creating the reality for yourself, seeing it, visualizing it in space, so you can retain congruence in your interactions with what it is that you create. And this is what you can see here. I know where I opened the bubble up from, I know where I opened it up to, so I'm able to move back round and close it back down again. And this is a continuation of the anchoring process. It's utilizing how I spatially created the bubble in order to close it back down again in an experientially congruent way. Finally, I return to the position where I'd originally begun opening the bubble up, and I bring my hand up and quite theatrically I click my fingers and have the bubble pop and disappear. Now, I've talked before about creating moments. This is an example of creating moments, putting a lot of attention, a lot of focus, a lot of significance on that moment, creating it, and at that point the bubble shuts back down. This is a very useful thing to be able to do, and it's mostly created non-verbally. Now, there's a quick point worth making here around the languaging. I'm using the words let that bubble close back down. Now, this is the language of non-volition. One of the signatures of hypnosis is that the experience that's happening feels like it's happening to the person who's experiencing it. It doesn't necessarily feel like something that they're creating, even though it is. It feels like it's happening to. Now, if you want to create this effect, you want your languaging to support this. So phrases like let that happen are doing just that. Okay, so that's the end of the sequence. The bubble has closed back down, reality has been returned to normal, and we can move on with the rest of the presentation. Okay, so that's it, the bubble induction. I hope that's a useful piece for you. I hope you can make good use of it. If you're watching this on the Hypnosis Without Trance blog at www.hypnosiswithouttrance, have a look below the video, or maybe above the video, I'm not sure how I'm going to do it yet. I will put a small transcript of what's going on in this linguistically. But please do not see this as a script. It is not a script. Whilst the language is there supporting what's going on, it is about the idea, the concept, what you are setting up for the people you are working with and how you are inviting them to engage with that. That's what's important. The language, the script, the breakdown, the transcript is just there to offer you some ideas and to offer you the opportunity to analyse it and really think about what's going on there. Okay, I hope you find that useful. I hope that is something you go out, you play with, you make great use of. If you have any questions about it, please do ask in the comments section below. Or if you have any stories or tales of how you've used this and how you've made great use of this, I would also love to hear from you about those as well. So please do make good use of the comments section below. Have a wonderful beginning to 2013. I will look forward to speaking to you again soon. Until then, have a great January.